My next patron question is from Trevor, who wants to know if I were in charge of the MCU, would I have them go the way of DC and have mostly self-contained stories, or continue on the cinematic universe path? This is an interesting question. At this point, the MCU has grown so massive and is featuring so many heroes, it does feel like they expect viewers to have a major knowledge of their characters and their previous stories walking in, even though each individual film should logically be able to stand on its own. On the other hand, part of what made the MCU so popular was how interconnected they are, and viewers wanting to follow each hero to whatever story they end up in. That's one reason Avengers Endgame was such a monumental success, as audiences had grown to care about these superheroes on their various adventures and wanting to see how they reverse the biggest threat they ever faced. I've often said about action movies that in order for them to work, you need to be invested in the characters. If I don't find the characters to be all that compelling, then I'm going to find it difficult to care about the action and heroics they're performing. I do have a lot of respect for what Kevin Feige and the directors and writers he's employed have pulled off with these movies. It was an incredible undertaking, and while not the first interconnected media universe, as Kevin Smith and Hanna-Barbera can attest to, the scale of which Marvel Studios pulled these off is remarkable. Now, of course, there are so many movies and shows in the franchise now, not everything is going to take off. There are a few films and Disney Plus series I can admit to being underwhelmed by. However, I've always viewed the MCU as akin to a television show, and I don't mean that as an insult. If one episode ends up disappointing me, the next one could still impress. I think even as the output has increased, it still has a solid batting average. I honestly don't know how I'm going to feel about the next Marvel movie, but always retain that curiosity for where it takes me. Now, will the interconnectivity of the MCU become a problem in the future? Maybe. I've often wondered how people born now are going to feel if they try to get into the MCU later on. Will it be too overwhelming with the gazillion movies as well as television shows that will be required viewing? These films should not feel like homework. I do think one reason the Marvels did not do well is because two of the main characters and the story of how they got their superpowers primarily came from Disney Plus shows. Not everyone has Disney Plus and will have seen WandaVision and Ms. Marvel, and even though the movie tried its best to get people up to speed, I'm sure there were still those who skipped the film on theatrical release due to not having watched those two. Although I did find it amusing that despite Nick Fury's role in the movie, it makes absolutely no mention of the events of Secret Invasion. Meanwhile, the depiction of Wanda Maximoff in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness must have been odd to anyone who not seen WandaVision. I guess it's possible in the future the MCU could be akin to the James Bond movies, where, with the exception of the Daniel Craig films, you can watch them in whatever order you please. But some of the emotional resonance following these characters for so long won't be there. And there are also major events like Thanos' snap that do affect certain films and their stories. I think they really are designed to be watched in release order. Now, there are some Marvel films that do manage to be self-contained. The first two Guardians of the Galaxy movies are examples of this, as they mostly exist in their own world and are not affected by the other films. Yes, Thanos is briefly in the films, but he is specific to the stories being told in them. Only Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is meant to follow the events of the last few Avengers movies with regards to Gamora. The Black Panther movies are also largely self-contained, and someone can watch those without seeing the other films and still follow along. There's a part of me that does miss when superhero movies were not so interconnected. Tim Burton's Batman movies exist in their own world, completely devised by him and his production team, and without trying to fit Christopher Reeve's Superman movies into them. Before Disney acquired 20th Century Fox, the X-Men characters were also exclusive to those movies, without the studio mixing them with Fantastic Four and Daredevil. Although, funnily enough, Hugh Jackman almost made a Wolverine cameo in Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie, but it did not work out. I'm glad it did not happen myself, and the closest thing to a Marvel Easter egg is the Doctor Strange mention in Spider-Man 2, which I do like. Back to the MCU, they're honestly so deep now into this shared universe concept, I don't know if they can change it. I would still keep going with it myself, especially since that is still what audiences like, as indicated by the success of Deadpool & Wolverine and its emphasis on other films both inside and outside the MCU. However, there should definitely be films like Guardians of the Galaxy and Black Panther that can be watched on their own without prior knowledge of the rest of the franchise. Kevin Feige should definitely be careful in the future with how the Marvel Cinematic Universe proceeds. Thank you for your question, Trevor.